All right, guys, welcome back to the Swing Society podcast. I am once again rejoined by my boy Shauheen. We are going to be talking about some interesting topics. Welcome back, buddy. We missed you last week.
Yeah, it was an eventful week of personal events, so I had to take a little bit of a hiatus for about 14 days.
We had a fun week. I'm glad you're back. We discussed golf schooler questions. We had them reach out and answered a bunch of questions. Really good to have you back. Glad everything's working out okay. I know you got some cool stuff going on. So what are you up to?
Pretty chill day, to be honest. Today is kind of a load up day on mentorship calls and stuff like that. So I kind of have been spending all day, weirdly enough, in front of a camera. So I might be a little bit talked out, but I'll be good to chat. Usually once a week, I run a mentorship program for those who don't know, and oftentimes we'll deep dive about the golf swing. I'll put some swings up on the screen while I'm talking with somebody on the other side, and we chat about mechanics for basically an hour straight. So when you're like 5 hours deep into talking about swing mechanics, you get you get enough golf fix for basically a month.
I know you've done that, and you and I have discussed golf swing for a long time. I think if you are a younger coach getting into the game, I don't know if you have availability left into it, but that would be something I would immediately jump on. You do a good job. A lot of people I know around the country have done your program, and they turn out to be pretty solid coaches. So.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I've had my fair share of a stable of clients. I mean, I've probably done, I want to say since I started, I think it's 4 years now I'm doing the mentorship. I've probably done about 50 to 60 coaches over those 4 years. Like, I've taken on quite a few people. So I'm always interested in taking on more. If anything, we're actually restructuring a little bit the program for, the fall and the winter to try to handle actually more people, try to gauge a little bit more where people are at in their coaching journeys, and then kind of fitting them into maybe a little bit more of a group setting. But we'll see how things evolve over time.
I got one more question on that. What's the average? Would you say the average coach that's coming out to you is a couple years of experience in, knows a little bit what they're doing? They're trying to take the jump to the next level to get elite players, or just coach the regular folks? What are you looking at?
I would say that probably a small majority of them are coaches who are, kind of in that like 2 to 5 year experience range, where a lot of them are either, trying to fill their lesson book more, because obviously it's hard to do at first. And, most of them are giving maybe anywhere from 10 to 25 hours a week. And they're trying to learn a lot more about swing mechanics, because obviously having a good base is great, especially when you're dealing with juniors and, the higher handicap. But obviously at a certain point, you kind of feel capped out on your knowledge. You and I both know when you're dealing with better players, and especially once you get into the elite side, it's a completely different experience. It's a different world altogether. So kind of training them and preparing them for what's to come when they do start to work with better players, and just building confidence. At the end of the day, that's what it is. When you're in a 1 hour setting and you're not confident with what you're about to experience, you get very anxious, you get nervous, you start to second guess yourself, and that comes across in your tone of voice, in your communication, and how you structure the lesson. And in my experience, in running through this program, I think the biggest mistake a lot of these coaches make is they really try to force a lot of changes. They're very nervous to make adjustments mid-lesson. They're very nervous to give them a swing change that they're not 100% convinced is going to lead to a good result. And I think that, when you go through this long enough, that what makes sense on paper doesn't always translate as smoothly in practicality when you're working with a student. And sometimes you do need to make those mid-lesson adjustments. And obviously, as you become more confident as a coach, you're much more open and willing to make those adjustments, which is the whole thing. So learning a lot about swing mechanics, building a lot of confidence, learning how to structure a lesson better. That's kind of the gist of it. And if you can come up with a package of those three pillars, among many other things, you'll improve greatly, and you'll feel a lot better going into lessons with better players, obviously.
Yeah, I would recommend any coach who's looking to do that, hit you up for that thing. I am currently sitting in a simulator room outside of a Webster Golf Course here in Rochester. We just did an event out here. I might hear a few swings in the background.
You know what we need to do? You know, we need to start. Sorry to cut you off. We need to start putting an animation. We're gonna have Max, who, for those of you who don't know, was on the last episode with Chris, the producer of the show. Um, we should have him build out like an animation of where's Chris at now or something. You know, like a cartoony kind of animation where it just shows up and it's you like on a cartoon plane traveling the world and like flying into whatever city you're currently at for your golf schools.
I will next week. So when this podcast comes out, I'll have 2 more quick dates afterwards. I'll have Omaha and Des Moines. Both of them are sold out now. And then I'll actually be home for 1 week. And then the next podcast, I will be in Alaska teaching golf. So
when was the last time you spent longer than 7 straight days at home?
Oh man, this year, because I had the issues with my dad and was getting him back to health. So I spent a lot of time in DC. It has been February was the last time I spent more than 10 days at home. It's been
10 days at home. Home being Vegas, obviously.
Home meaning Vegas. Yeah, I'm excited. Like, I plan on building out a nice little podcast room like you have, and everything like that. And then I realized that I'm gone for 80% of them, but we're putting some time in to get something. It
would be really weird for you to build out this whole thing and like show it off only for like the next 15 straight episodes to just have different backgrounds every time.
Yes, I'm not in a hotel this time. I'm actually at a golf course. We had an awesome school here in Rochester. Although we managed to our mics managed to break on us, which is wonderful. We record the whole school, send everything out, and I realized at the very end. Luckily, it was a tiny clip of the golf school that we lost. So we've been dealing with trying to figure out how to get new mics before we go to Buffalo for the school tomorrow so they can hear everything. That's fun.
So you're up in my alley right now. You're in the Northeast.
I am about as tonight I'll be about as close to Canada as I can possibly get. I'll be about 30 minutes
literally.
from the border.
Well, I mean, Rochester's only about like a 5-hour drive from where I'm at right now.
Yeah. It's around from where I have to go to get into your neck of the woods, but we're right there. I can see, if I could see across that giant lake that's about 4 miles from me, I'd be looking at Canada. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
Awesome.
We got some fun topics that we were gonna cover today, and I wanted to throw the first one at you. I like this. I'll follow up after you give your opinion, but change in golf coach culture from the 90s to today. Differences: work ethic, social media influence, willingness to share information. That is a big one. I want to hear your opinion on all this.
I mean, for starters, I think I can have an entire episode just about this culture stuff. Right? I'll give a little bit of my backstory, and then we'll talk about the change in culture and how things have changed. Because I think in many ways it's gotten better, in a few ways maybe less so. For starters, you know, I run an academy here in Montreal, and I've gone through my fair share of coaches who have been in and out of the academy over the last 5 to 8 years since we've been running the business. And I've obviously seen a wide range of work ethics and you know, ages and skill levels and things like that. And the one thing that has become increasingly clear to me is that the work ethic is not quite there as much on the physical side as it used to be. And this is not to discredit all of them. I mean, I love my staff, and you know, I have so many good things to say about them because I believe they're very knowledgeable. But just from what I've seen from the public side of not even my own staff at Mac Giovanni Golf, but even other academies, other areas, is that the work ethic has changed immensely. You know, when I first started giving golf lessons, obviously I'm going to relate this back to myself. The only way I was able to give lessons, because I'm not a PGA member, which we have talked about before and we can talk about for till the end of time, was they would allow me to give lessons at night from the driving range of whoever was there hitting golf balls. If I can, like, I don't want to say poach students, but like give some swing tips at the time. And, you know, some of them would be interested in taking lessons. And, you know, during that period, the only way I was even allowed to do that, I had to give 15 free hours at the pro shop every week. And then the second year, I had to give 10 hours for free at the pro shop every week. And then the third year, I had to give 5 hours for free at the pro shop every week. Now, you add that up, 6 months a year, right? Like, think about the amount of free time I've given to the golf course for access to
Sure.
students. It's literally for access. At the end of the day, it's not like I was on their website and I was the face of the company. Like this is
Sure.
you come and give me these pro shop hours and we'll give you the opportunity to go at the range. And if people reach out and contact the golf course, they'll have my information and I can give lessons and whatever. And I did that for 3 straight years, basically volunteering my time to be able to give lessons. And then during that period, I started to get busier. And then on the off hours where I wasn't working, I basically was trying to film content and get my name out there. So it was, a lot of, you get to the golf course at 6 a.m., you film content for 2-3 hours, you do the pro shop hours, and then at night you'll poach the range and talk to students and give free help and see who you can sell lessons to, and then kind of repeat the process every week. And the work ethic that I'm starting to come across more nowadays is this like expectation from people to just get busy right away with very minimal effort.
Sure.
And, I relating this to my own academy and my own experiences, like, of course, we can feed clients and students. There's people who call in and ask for lessons all the time. But at some point, you need to go above and beyond for these people to retain them. I can't do the work for you to retain a student. I can't do the work. I can teach you about the golf swing, and I have, just like the mentorship program, I have in-person versions of that for my own staff where we talk about the golf swing and I put swings up on the screen and I try to teach them as much as possible. But then it becomes a recurring theme of like the follow-ups are not there. They're not trying to put their name out there. They're not trying to sell for themselves whatsoever. There's just this expectation underlying from a lot of people of like, well, nobody called in this week for my help, so I'm just going to sit kind of on my ass and do nothing about it a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
I know this can come across a little bit like critical and negative, and I don't mean that in any way. Like I love my staff and they are some of the most knowledgeable coaches out there. But from my experience with them, just like many other academies that I've been to where I've done teaching outside of my own city, there's not the same work ethic to get your name out there like there used to be. Now,
Sure.
as a side note, to play a little bit of devil's advocate, obviously social media is a thing, and a lot of people are trying to film content and getting their name out there. And I respect that so much. I did that obviously a lot more at the beginning than I do now, just because of how my business has evolved a little bit. But I love that. I believe that putting yourself on camera is one of the best things you can do as a coach, because you're going to pick up on how to communicate information differently as you do it. You're going to realize that your intonations and how you speak and the speed and pacing in which you talk matters a lot. If it matters to a camera, to someone who's watching you, it's going to matter just as much in a lesson setting where you have an hour to get your point across to somebody who's never met you before. So
I'm going to jump. What you just said there is me and Max were talking about that for 45 minutes. Max and I practiced that for the golf school. What you just said is one of the most important things a golf coach needs right there.
There's no doubt. And to be honest, like even offering golf lessons online, I think made me a 20 times better coach in person, because
Sure.
I have to now get my point across online where I'm not there in front of the person. I cannot physically manipulate them into certain positions. So I have to be very clear in my communication of what I want them to do differently themselves. And they have to find a way to then internalize those feels and do them on their own time. So like offering in-person and online lessons is going to, of course, like be helpful, but for communication reasons, putting yourself in front of a camera just allows you to explain a concept in so many different ways and much more clearly every time you do it. I talk about the club face now. I'm as confident as ever, but the first time I did it, I probably ripped through the information and spoke really fast. And, I obviously cliche to say this, but like I cringe going back and watching some of my old content, not because I don't think the content necessarily can be helpful for people, but the way I explain information, the pacing in which I do it, the way I try to communicate the information and get them to internalize the feels are fucking ass compared to now. Like they're
Sure.
poor.
Well, that takes time to develop. As long as you're working
And this
developing.
relates back to my original point, which is I think what's lacking in a lot of people is the work ethic to develop your skills.
Yeah.
They learn about the golf swing. It's great. They have this knowledge base, but then to develop all the skills around it, to be able to structure a lesson effectively and be present and communicate properly and have a baseline of ways to go about fixing a student. I don't think they practice those skills nearly enough. And I'm referring to all the young coaches coming up from my experience. Obviously,
Sure.
I have a lot of them in my own academy, but in general, that's what I see. And to kind of the last point, when it comes to willingness to share information, I think that's the highest it's ever been. And I just think that really comes down to being on social media. At the end of the day, if you want to get your name out there, you have to present some sort of information that's either
Sure.
interesting or that people maybe haven't thought of before. You need to share information online. In the 90s, it's really easy to say, like, oh, these people all kept all the information to themselves. They did, don't get me wrong. Like, obviously, coaches were holding on to their information for dear life. But at the same time, there was no reason for them to share it. They weren't going to get more business for sharing this information.
Sure.
Whereas now you will. So obviously times have changed a lot. And so in many
I think
ways,
that's
I
for the
think
better.
that, yeah, I think in many ways the culture of golf instruction has improved a lot. But I think that the work ethic, the expectation to get business just because you have a big following now and you're Mr. Whoever who puts himself in front of the camera, like, dude, you got to bust your ass and go get some, go work hard and get the clients. Don't sit there and wait for them to come to you, basically.
I agree with all that. I got one thing. When you're running an academy, I think this was the best decision I ever made years ago. Obviously, I have coaches that teach for me. Those coaches, they escalate percentages, right? So their first client, if we sell their first package, I'm taking a hefty portion of that first package. If you get that renewal, your percentage goes way up. And then it goes to a final amount if you get a third renewal. So you better bust with all those clients. Work hard to make sure that you keep that client on your
Well,
lesson.
what you're doing in that situation is you're creating a structure of incentive, right?
Yes.
So
yeah.
we've tried incentive programs with my own academy, and it's hit or miss. It really comes down to the coach. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the coach. If the person wants to work really hard, they'll get a lot of business. I have some coaches who are extremely busy that work for us, and because they work the hardest and they're the most present and they're the most willing to put themselves in uncomfortable situations. The ones who aren't, unfortunately, kind of flatline, and that's there's only so much of a kick in the ass we can try to do for some of these people.
You also have the thing that you are a significant name in the golf industry, so you will have coaches that will work at your academy just to say they did it, and they don't plan on. I'm sure they go into that,
which could be a blessing and a curse to some degree, right? Like,
sure.
I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but obviously, like, I'd like to think my reputation holds some weight these days. And while that's good in many ways because people want to be there and learn from me, there's also some others who just want to go to take resume of I worked at this location and I just want to go somewhere else. And, the turnover is pretty high. It's just expected, right? People want to, first of all, people want to go on to make more money and do better things. And I totally respect that. At the same time, people want to be the guy. I think that's just what it is, right? Like, you don't want to, and I get this totally too. Like, you don't want to be someone working in my academy and who's just in my shadow for the rest of your life. Like, you want to go out and be the name and be the face on the wall. And, we had a couple of coaches leave our academy this year to go on to become head pros elsewhere. And I totally respect it. And honestly, they have learned enough to be able to earn that opportunity. So I'm happy for them. But,
that's most coaches.
That's the fun of running a business.
I take care of Max to the ultimate degree because I know deep down Max doesn't really care about being the guy. He likes what I do. He likes how I do it. I take care of him, in every way. He's financially taken care of, all that stuff. And I do that because I have a guy that I know, turnover on tour would be incredibly difficult. And as I expand these tour events, I know I'm going to have to bring on new coaches, and I fully expect to have to deal with the issues you're talking about where you get some younger kids in there that are just trying to get their foot in the door, their name associated with something, and then roll on. So I'm not necessarily looking forward to, the 1 year turnover you're discussing. That's going to be tough.
Yeah. Look, I'm very grateful to be in the situation I'm in. If there's anything I would say or suggest, it's just, if you're a young coach and you're listening to this, don't be discouraged. Just work extremely hard, be willing to put yourself in uncomfortable situations, and you're going to be 10 times the coach you were the year prior if you do that. It's a simple
thing. I think that's a good point. Make sure we're talking about people. You and I are people who are in different boats with our respective businesses, then a lot of people would be listening to that podcast. I think that's a good piece of advice for younger pros. So let's go on to examples on matchups that people don't consider. Examples where you placed where the club is placed to the top and how it will influence the shaft. I like that question.
Yeah. So the reason I wrote this question down is because, first of all, obviously I want to talk technical stuff too.
Yeah.
I didn't do enough of that today. I want to talk about technical stuff because obviously that's why people listen. They want to improve, and I think it's so important. Matchups between different variables and their chain reaction of events and things like that, like club alignment I mentioned at the top. It amazes me, and this kind of relates to one of the other questions that I wrote you about, like working backswing versus working downswing. It amazes me how many people are still stuck in the position of wanting to work on just what happens on the way down into the ball.
Yeah.
I totally understand some of the logic behind it, because at the end of the day, what happens on the way down is really where you're making contact with the ball, which is going to affect the delivery, which is going to affect the launch conditions and so on. But at the same time, what you do in the backswing essentially sets you up for success. I used to relate the backswing to trying to do a vertical leap. Okay. Now I can try and jump, because at the end of the day, how long I'm airborne and how high I'm getting is really the downswing up until impact. Like, that's what matters. But the preparation for that is what? It's the squatting, the flexion, the creating a platform to then push off of to be able to do something that you're trying to achieve. The backswing is that squat, right? So when I relate this, my point I'm trying to make is, like, you can make backswing changes that prepare you for the success of what's going to happen on the way down. So let's relate this to club alignment for a second, because I might be losing some people here. If you put the club more across the line at the top of the backswing, what is happening in getting the club there? Because it's not just the club magically appears there. Things have to change. Well, your lead forearm is closing more. The technical term for that is supinating. Okay. Now, when the forearms then rotate more to get the club more across the line, what do you think is going to be the likely outcome of those forearms in transition? Well, like an elastic, you force them very far one way, they're going to then go the other way coming down. So if I get the forearms more closed in the backswing, that can create a situation where my forearms can then rotate more open on the way down. Guess what rotating the forearms more open on the way down does to the pitch of the shaft? It shallows it out. Now, we don't want extreme versions of that, because I think that's too much movement and too much timing. But that concept is so important. The idea of preparing things in the backswing to help. I think the hand path is just as important in that regard. There's a cliche, obviously, phrase in physics, right? Like, every action has an opposite and equal reaction. If I get the hands more around me in the backswing, I have space to get the hands more in front of me on the way down. Right? When you want to rotate better in the downswing to hit the golf ball, rotation typically will want to push the hands back out in front of you. So creating space for the hands to be able to do that becomes super important, which is why we talk about this idea of building more hand depth for the average golfer. Right?
We lost you for the last 15 seconds of that thought. You disconnected.
Am I back?
For everyone. You're back. Yes.
Okay. So I referenced every action has an opposite and equal reaction.
That's right? Where you cut out. Yep.
Okay. So when you try and get the hands more around your body in the backswing, there is a bigger purpose there. It's because when you try to rotate on the way down into the golf ball, the more you rotate on the way down, your hands are going to want to work back in front of you. You're creating space and preparation to do that. So when we're talking about matchups, it's not as simple as, oh, there's an alignment here and there's an alignment there and they need to work together. It's, we are creating opportunity for what you can do differently on the way down into the ball. And I think that's where a lot of people tend to go wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah, So I today had 3 golfers on that driving range. All of them were the example of the player who moves the hands out in transition, rolls the club behind him, gets really flat, stands it up, come over the top. That's a pattern I see all the time. When we're talking hand path, for those players, I got all of them to I put blocks in the way, and then I had them start feeling their bodies. But when we're talking hand path, what are different ways that you can add it? General rule of thumb, we want that hand path more moving in the backswing. We talk about that. What are some of the ways that you can add it? And what are we really wanting to focus on when we're on the driving range? I mean, most golfers are looking at their downswing instead of the backswing. What are we focusing on when we're trying to do that?
So here's the thing. In my opinion, more golfers should be worrying about where their backswing alignments are. That's like as clear cut as I can tell you. I think that far too many people worry about trying to put the club in a better position on the way down without preparing that in advance by getting the backswing alignments a certain way.
Sure.
And if you got the backswing alignments a certain way, it would facilitate getting the club in a certain position on the way down a lot easier. Right? So that's where backswings carry its value. But then it comes down to having a good communication with someone who can explain to you the importance of where your matchups are. I think that people are just very simply unaware. I'm not even going to tell you that people should take lessons because it's going to always make them better. It should. That's obviously the purpose behind it. But people should take lessons to learn more about their golf swing. And that's something that I strive for so much, to be honest, is that I want people who come and see me to leave after an hour having a much better understanding of where their golf swing DNA is at and how it needs to evolve for them to get to whatever their end goals are. And if they can do that, they can hit the ball really solid. But people try to work on swing changes without understanding their DNA and where they actually need to focus. And then it's like throwing stuff at a wall and hoping something sticks, which is just very unrealistic.
Sure. My first three questions when I do these schools. First is, what happens when you hit it bad? What's the big miss? What happens when you hit it good now? What happens in the future? If you could do anything you'd want, what do you want to do? They tell me that, and then we discuss what their current pattern is, why it leads to this problem, why it leads to this shot. And these are the changes you will need to do. So we have that first discussion right there, immediately trying to pinpoint and give them the knowledge of their golf swing. Then I move into feels, drills, all that stuff. But I want them to have an understanding of their pattern and what their pattern needs to do to be in a good position. I'm sure you handle your golf lessons similar to that.
I mean, I have a survey or a questionnaire, for every student who comes and sees me. Online especially, I have them fill out a complete questionnaire, and it basically gives me all of that. The understanding of what are your current tendencies when you're hitting poor shots in terms of strike, in terms of flight, in terms of contact on the ground. What are your tendencies in terms of ball flight when you struggle on the course, big misses? What are the good shots doing? And then obviously, like you said, what is your long-term preference? Which is very important, because at the end of the day, I can get somebody to hit the tightest little push draw of all time, but if they want to see a fade, they're not going to fucking like the ball flight they're seeing.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, there's a purpose behind your change. You have to satisfy the person who's in front of you. So, even if it's to a fault to a degree.
I had two of those conversations the last 2 days, Syracuse and Rochester. I had a guy, I went through that thing and I asked them what they wanted to see, and they both said baby draws. And I get through explaining their whole pattern, and they're like, oh no, that's just a pipe dream. I wouldn't feel comfortable unless I saw a fade. So I think I'm going to have to change my wording of that question, because that's 5 minutes of a golf school for that one person right out the door. Like, what the dream scenario is versus what they're comfortable with is,
Yeah. That's
really,
a whole other ball game right there.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you can have a good understanding of everyone's games, and then you see on 2D what they're doing, and you get ball flight data and sometimes 3D help and whatever.
Yep.
There's not a single reason why that student should ever leave your lesson not understanding the full package of where they are at right now, what they need to do to get to point B and point C, and what the expectations of contact and ball flight should be through each step of that process. Because I think that's super important, right? You want somebody practicing on the driving range, your swing, suggestions. And if they hit a certain ball flight, you want them to be like, oh, well, fucking Shauheen told me that was exactly the ball flight I was expecting. We're all good. Versus like hitting a ball and being like, well, I wasn't expecting that and I don't like it and I don't know what to do differently now.
Yeah, I get that. Let's do this one. Differences between tour players and amateur golfers. Why shouldn't the amateur golfer try and copy the tour player's golf swing? Why shouldn't we all try and be Tiger Woods?
Because you're not that fucking good.
Exactly.
I believe that even the best golfers in the history of the game had things in their golf swing mechanically that we probably weren't the biggest fans of. And it's almost crazy to say that, because then you're going to get the listeners who are going to be like, well, he's fucking Tiger Woods. How could that be? Yeah. Well, that could be. Find me one person on this planet who sees Scotty Scheffler dominating everything he's doing right now and saying, I want to copy his footwork. I've seen meme videos about it, but nobody's copying his fucking footwork. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Even the best golfers in the world have things that they do that they can get away with that the regular commoner cannot. It's as simple as that. So I've never been a fan of copying golf swings in its entirety, like building models based on a tour player. I think is kind of foolish. The one thing I will say, I'm a big believer of copying elements of golf swings. You know, when I work with players, especially online, I will oftentimes give them a swing to look at. But really, I'm highlighting a very specific element of that golf swing, and I want the player to understand that it's only that specific element. It could be how the wrist angle is moving from top of backswing to transition. It could be where the club is simply aligned at the top of the backswing. It could be how much lateral a player has on the way down or how much rotation they have. It could be something they're doing with their pressure really early in the takeaway. But it'll never be like me saying, hey, take Rory's golf swing, go watch it for the next 5 years and copy it in its entirety and come back and you're going to stripe the golf ball. Like, I've never done that. I'm not a fan of doing that. I don't believe in copying full models because golf is just such a subjective game. I think it's unrealistic to take that approach and expect to see good golf. You know, Rory McIlroy can bench fucking 300 pounds and hit 4 million balls a week. Why are we trying to copy his golf swing? When the average golfer sits at a desk all day and doesn't have that strength and plays one round of golf a month. Like, what are we trying to do here? It's such different worlds, you know? So there might be certain aspects of Rory's golf swing we like. If the average golfer shifted as much laterally as Rory did, they'd probably compress the ball better than they do right now, because who knows how many golfers there are on the driving range who spin out on their back foot and don't get any weight forward, right? And they can't hit the ball very well.
Well, you see it all the time.
We see it all the time. So there are aspects of a guy like Rory's swing or Scotty's swing or whoever for that matter that absolutely I would want certain people to copy. But don't go out there and copy tour players' golf swings and say, I want to swing it like this guy. Say, I want to do this like this guy or that. But I'm a big believer of taking individual isolated pieces of swings, not the swing in its entirety.
I think that the swing like somebody thing comes from, it's been in golf instruction. I've been doing this for 24 years now, when you go back to me teaching it in high school. And, you know, we'd have junior camps and they'd put pictures of positions Tiger Woods hit. But that came from, you know, and through no fault of the day that the swing it like a pro concept came from. That came when we didn't have all this modeling, you know, all this technology that we have access to. All we had was a 2D, for a while, not even slow motion golf swing. Yeah. And people would get some snaps and some pictures of positions of these tour players. And that's really all they could go off of when it came to teaching. Like the instructional game that you and I are in now, we talked about this a few weeks ago, is so different than the instructional game that was around in the 90s. And that's no fault to them. They did not have access to the wealth of information that you and I have, that we can take to our lesson tee and then verify with the player, this is what's happening, right? There was no Doppler radar managing players. There was no, you know, 3D.
Here's
a different game.
I got this artwork when I was 15 years
Yes.
old.
Yes, I've seen that. Yep.
It's still in my house,
Yes.
right? And what this artwork is it's 9-way screenshot of Ben Hogan's golf swing from face on.
Yep. Who hasn't
Do you
seen
know
that? That's it.
Do you know how many times I've stared at that golf swing and probably thought to myself to copy those positions when I was 16 years old?
Yeah. That's all we had, man. That's what our coaches told us when we were kids. That's all they had access to was those screenshots of positions. And who knows if those were actual full speed pictures. Someone could check that. But
The best part about it is, first of all, yeah, right? How many times have you seen Golf Digest, for example, do work with players for their magazine, and really they're getting them to pose in a position that's not even
Yes.
realistically their actual golf swing?
Yes.
But at the end of the day, I think that we are at a stage of golf instruction right now where it's the best it's ever been. There's the most information that's ever been out there, and yet let's utilize it as optimally as possible. And in order to do that, there's absolutely no reason you should go out there and copy someone's golf swing, let alone still images of what somebody was doing 50 years ago.
I 100% agree. So let's wrap this with this, man. I am going to be next 2 days, Omaha, Des Moines. If you want to come see me after that, Alaska, Seattle towards the end of the month, Asia, Australia, you can find me next month. What do you have going on over the next few weeks, brother?
A lot of in-person coaching, a lot of mentorship programs, a little bit of travel for Steven, and that's about it. Pretty low-key, dude. Montreal is my favorite place in the summer. It's very warm out here. We deal with a lot of shitty weather out here, but when it's here in the summer, the city is vibing really well, so it's kind of hard to want to leave.
I will tell you, of all these cities I go to, I always put Montreal in my top 10 worldwide cities. I love that place, and I get why you wouldn't want to leave.
Yeah, especially in the summer, for sure.
Yep. All right, man. Well, good chat, and we'll catch them next week.
All right, dude.